I flew 22 hours to watch my sister get married. My mother met me at the door and told me to leave. And 3 days later, when $41,000 in invoices started landing on my parents' kitchen table, every single one addressed to me, she finally understood what she had done. She just didn't understand it the way she expected to. My name is Serena. I'm 36 years old, and I want to tell you about the most expensive lesson I ever taught my family. About the moment I stopped being the daughter they could count on and started being the daughter they couldn't ignore. But first, I need you to understand what kind of family we were. My parents, Helen and Martin, had 2 daughters. On paper. In practice, they had one, my younger sister, Ivy. Ivy is 27, warm and social, the kind of person who lights up a room by accident. She was never cruel to me. She was just first. First in attention, first in investment, first in the story our family told about itself. Growing up, I understood my role. I was the capable one. The responsible one. The one who didn't need much because she never asked for much. Helen used to say it like a compliment. Serena handles herself. What she meant was, Serena doesn't require anything from us. So I didn't require anything. I built that into my identity so deeply that I forgot it was a choice. I left our hometown of Clover Falls when I was 22, relocated to Vancouver for a graduate program in urban planning, and stayed. I built a career, a life, a circle of friends who didn't know the mechanics of how I'd grown up. I called home on Sundays. The calls lasted about 12 minutes on average. Helen would tell me about Ivy's life. Her new apartment, her job, her boyfriend. Then she'd ask if I was eating enough and say goodbye. My father, Martin, would occasionally get on the line for 2 or 3 minutes to talk about the weather or hockey. He was not a bad man. He was a man who had learned to follow his wife's lead and called it harmony. I loved them. I want to be clear about that because this story isn't about hate. Hate is simple. What I felt was much more complicated and much harder to walk away from. When Ivy called me in January to tell me she was engaged to a man named Declan Thorne, whose family owned a regional hotel chain, I felt something unambiguous for the first time in years. Pure joy. I congratulated her for 10 minutes and asked about the ring and the proposal, and when the date was set, I meant every word. Helen got on the line near the end of the call. We're thinking small, she said. Spring, maybe June. Nothing too elaborate. Whatever Ivy wants, I said. I'll book flights. A pause. You don't have to do that, Serena. It's a long trip. Helen. It's my sister's wedding. Of course. We'll keep you posted. That phrase, "will keep you posted," was the first flag. I flew past it. 2 weeks later, my mother called on a Tuesday afternoon. Helen only calls on weekdays when she's been thinking about something since morning. She had her practical voice on. The one that wraps a request in reasonableness. Serena, I need to ask you something. For Ivy's wedding. Of course. The venue requires a credit card to hold the date. You know how these places are. And the caterer, the florist, the photographer. They all want a card on file. Your father and I had some issues last year with the bank. Nothing serious, but our credit isn't where it should be. And Ivy's just getting started. She doesn't have the history. I leaned back in my desk chair. I already knew the shape of what was coming. How much are we talking? The contracts total around $43,000. But the deposits are just $6,000, spread across 4 vendors. The balances don't come due until after the event. $6,000 up front. $37,000 in deferred liability under my name. Mom, that's not a small ask. It's not your money, Serena. It's just your signature. We'll handle everything after. You know we will. I did know. In the same way I knew that when I was 24 and co-signed a car loan for my father, it took 2 years of phone calls and credit repair to untangle. In the same way I knew that the $3,200 I wired Helen for a furnace replacement 3 winters ago appeared on Ivy's tuition transcript when I checked the timing later. But this was my sister's wedding. And I was the capable one. Send me the contracts, I said. I signed all 4 within the week. Venue deposit. $1,600. Caterer. $1,200. Florist. $900. Photography $1,300. Total out of pocket $6,000. Total liability in my name $41,200. I told myself this was what family does. Over the next 3 months, the wedding took shape in a group chat I was never added to. I found out the chat existed when Ivy accidentally forwarded me a message meant for her bridesmaids. A photo of centerpiece options with "Vote by Friday" in the caption. I was not asked to vote. I called Ivy twice to ask about the dress code, the ceremony program, whether she wanted a reading from me. The first call she answered and said she'd follow up. The second went to voicemail. She texted an hour later. So busy. Talk soon. I asked Helen if there was anything she needed from me. Everything's under control, sweetheart, she said. You don't have to worry about a thing. 6 weeks before the wedding, Ivy posted photos from the engagement party on social media. Helen and Martin flanked her in the center of every frame. Declan's parents, the Thorns, stood on either side. The caption read, "Two families becoming one." I wasn't in a single photo. I almost called. Almost asked why I hadn't been invited, why I hadn't even been told about it. But I talked myself out of it the way I always did. Maybe I'd misread the situation, maybe it was local only, maybe it was last minute. The architecture of my family had always included a department of plausible explanations, and I had been its most loyal tenant for years. I booked my flights. Round trip Vancouver to Toronto, connecting to the regional airport nearest Clover Falls. $1,400. 4 nights at a hotel near the venue, the only decent option within 20 minutes. $760. Ivy's wedding gift, a custom piece of jewelry she'd mentioned admiring once during a video call. $940, chosen and wrapped with care on my hotel bed the night before the wedding. Total before I set foot in that venue, $3,100. On the first leg of the flight, somewhere over the Rockies, I opened my notes app and worked on the toast I'd been drafting for weeks. Not long. Maybe 90 seconds. A memory about teaching Ivy to ride her bike on the driveway of the house in Clover Falls. How she refused to let me hold the seat. How she wobbled and fell and got up before I could reach her. How that was her in a sentence. I wanted to make people laugh. I wanted Ivy to feel seen. I landed and texted Helen. Just arrived. Checked in. Can't wait to see everyone tomorrow. She replied 40 minutes later. Great. Ceremony starts at 2. No, we're so glad you're here. No, get some rest, we'll see you in the morning. Just a time like a schedule update. Like a memo from someone who manages your calendar, but has forgotten they're also your mother. I ironed my dress that night. Charcoal silk, bought at a boutique in Gastown specifically for this weekend. I set my alarm, turned off the light, lay in the dark, and listened to the hum of the hotel ventilation system. I did the math I always tried not to do. The co-signed loan. The furnace transfer. The emergency wire 2 Christmases ago when Ivy's car needed transmission work and Helen said it was urgent. Just a bridge she'd sorted out. 6 years of being the bridge. Of being the capable one. Of signing things and sending things and never once being asked how I was doing at the end of a call that wasn't about a crisis. I told myself that tomorrow would be different. That seeing them in person, being in the same room would reset something. That maybe the absence of invitations and updates and thank yous was just the chaos of wedding planning. And when I walked through that door tomorrow, Helen would pull me in and say, "I'm so glad you're here, Serena." I fell asleep slowly. I set a second alarm just in case. The venue was called Millbrook Estate, converted farmhouse, white timber, a field of manicured grass rolling toward a tree lean in the back. Lanterns hung from old maple trees along the entrance path. When I arrived 20 minutes early, the parking lot was already half full. Guests in summer dresses and linen suits drifted in clusters toward the main doors. Music drifted out. A string ensemble playing something by Vivaldi. I smoothed my dress, picked up the gift, followed the stone path toward the entrance. My father was standing near the main doors in a rented suit that was slightly too short in the arms. He was talking to a man I didn't recognize, someone from the Thorne family from the look of the suit. When Martin looked up and saw me, his face went through 3 expressions in under 2 seconds. Recognition, alarm, something I can only call retreat. He looked back at the man he was talking to. He did not wave. He did not walk toward me. He turned slightly away and continued his conversation. I kept walking. The entrance doors opened from the inside as I reached them. Helen stepped out. She was wearing a moss green dress with a silk wrap around her shoulders. Her hair was set. Her lipstick was fresh. She looked like exactly what she was. A mother of the bride on the best day of her younger daughter's life. and she stepped directly into my path, hands folded at her waist, chin slightly raised, like a woman who had rehearsed this. Serena. Mom. I smiled, arms open. I made it. She did not step forward. She did not open her arms. What are you doing here? The words landed so cleanly I almost didn't understand them. I'm here for the wedding, Mom. I just flew in from Vancouver. You need to leave. Her voice was low, tightly controlled. She glanced over my shoulder at the arriving guests. Please. I'm your daughter. This is family only. Her eyes flicked to the gift in my hands, then back to my face. You weren't invited. I stood there on the stone path with Vivaldi drifting from the open doors behind her, and tried to locate some part of myself that was not completely at sea. I signed every contract for this wedding, I said. Quiet. Even. I paid every deposit. I flew 22 hours. This isn't about that. Mom. I'm your daughter. Serena. Her voice dropped to a near whisper that was somehow worse than a shout. Do not make a scene. Behind her, through the half-open door, I could see white ribbon chairs arranged in rows, sunlight falling through tall windows, the altar draped in greenery. Everything I had funded, everything I had put my name on. Martin appeared in the doorway. He looked at me. He looked at Helen. He put his hands in his jacket pockets. He said nothing. Not a single word. Then a voice from inside, warm, authoritative, the tone of a woman who runs things. Helen? Is everything all right out there? The woman who appeared in the doorway a moment later was Declan's mother, Eleanor Thorne. Silver hair, structured blazer, the kind of composure that comes from decades of hosting events and handling crises in heels. She looked at me with open, curious eyes. Helen transformed in real time. Her spine straightened. Her expression softened. Her voice went honeyed and warm. Oh, it's nothing, Eleanor. Just a mix-up. A family friend who had the wrong time. Eleanor looked at me again. Looked back at Helen. I thought you only had the one daughter. The silence lasted 3 seconds. Felt like a season. I do. Helen laughed. A short, bright, brittle sound. This is a cousin. From Martin's side. She gets the events confused, bless her. Eleanor nodded once. Not entirely convinced. She touched Helen's arm and went back inside. Helen looked at me. I looked at her. In her eyes there was no guilt. No grief. There was only the flat, calculating look of a woman deciding whether the lie had held. A cousin, I said. Serena. You told them you only have one daughter. Her jaw tightened. You don't understand the position we're in with the Thorns. They're a particular kind of family. It was easier to. How long? She blinked. How long have you been telling people I don't exist? She didn't answer. She glanced toward the parking lot, hoping I would simply dissolve. Hoping I would choose, as I always had, to absorb this and carry on. And this is the moment I want to stop and ask you something. If your mother looked you in the eye and told a room full of people she only has one child, while you were standing right there, what would you do? Would you push through those doors? Would you make the scene she was terrified of? Or would you do what I did? Tell me in the comments. Because what I chose in that moment changed everything that came after. I crouched down, placed the gift, the $940 piece of jewelry I'd chosen with care, gently on the stone step. I straightened up. That's for Ivy, I said. Whatever you tell people, that's still my sister. Helen's shoulders dropped. Relieved. She thought it was over. Thank you, Serena. This is really for the... Don't. I said it quietly. Not cruelly. Just stop. Don't explain. Don't make it reasonable. I heard every word. I understand exactly what happened here. I turned. I walked back down the stone path, past the lanterns, past the Vivaldi, past a couple arriving hand in hand who smiled at me like I was just another guest. I got to my rental car. I sat down. I closed the door. Then I cried. The quiet kind. The kind where your shoulders shake but your mouth stays closed, because even alone in a parking lot, you have been taught not to make noise. I sat there for 8 minutes. Through the car window I heard the ensemble shift to something slower. The ceremony had started. Ivy was walking down an aisle I had paid for, toward a man whose family didn't know I existed, under lights whose invoices were addressed to me. I started the engine and drove away. In the rearview mirror, Millbrook Estate shrank to a cluster of light between the trees. I didn't slam a door. I didn't raise my voice. I just left. And for the first time in years, leaving felt like something I was choosing. Back at the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed in my charcoal silk dress and opened my laptop. For vendor confirmation emails from the past 2 weeks sat in my inbox. Invoice reminders, each addressed to me as the contract holder, each cheerful and matter-of-fact. I had skimmed them before. Now I read every line. Millbrook Estate. Deposit paid $1,600. Balance $14,600. Due within 5 business days of the event. Harlow Catering. Deposit paid $1,200. Balance $11,400. Due within 5 business days. Garden and Stem Florals. Deposit paid $900. Balance $7,300. Whitmore Photography. Deposit paid $1,300. Balance $7,900. Total remaining balance $41,200. Due Thursday. My name on every single contract. My card number. My signature, scanned and attached in PDF. I closed the laptop. I sat in the quiet. Outside the window, the parking lot of the Magnolia Motor Inn was completely empty. Everyone in Clover Falls was at the wedding. My phone rang at 10:15 that night. It was my mother's older sister, Aunt Doris, the family's designated truth-teller, a retired nurse who had once told a hospital administrator exactly what she thought of his scheduling policy and was not wrong. Helen called her abrasive. I called her the only person in our extended family who said what she meant. Serena, where were you? I didn't see you at the ceremony. I was there, I said. I just didn't make it inside. Silence. Then, tell me. So I did. All of it. The path, the blocked door, the whisper, the word cousin, Eleanor Thorne's question, Helen's answer. When I finished, Doris was quiet long enough that I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. She told them she only had one child, Doris said at last. Flat. And she's had your name on $40,000 of contracts for how long? Since February. Another silence. When Doris spoke again, her voice had shifted, still steady, but with a particular quality underneath it, the kind that sounds like a decision being made. Serena, those contracts, every one of them is in your name. Yes. Then nothing gets paid until you say so. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. That's what I was thinking. Don't think about it anymore, Doris said. Go to sleep. Make your calls in the morning. If you've ever been the person who absorbs, pays, signs, and shows up, the one who makes everything possible while being made invisible, you are not alone. Not for a single second of it. Subscribe to the Betrayal Files. New stories every week for people who know exactly how this feels. Sunday morning. The light through the hotel curtains was gray and thin. I lay in bed for 5 minutes staring at the ceiling, reviewing the logic I'd worked through 3 times the night before. The contracts were in my name. That was a liability. It was also authority. The person named on a contract can authorize payment or decline it. I had signed as the contract holder. I had never agreed to be the bank. I picked up the phone and called Millbrook Estate. A woman answered. Friendly, efficient. I identified myself. Stated that I was the named contract holder for the event held the previous day. Explained, calmly and without elaboration, that I would not be authorizing any further charges to my card. Asked that the outstanding balance of $14,600 be redirected to the event hosts, the family in Clover Falls. A brief pause. I'll need to pass this to the manager, but I can note the request. Is there a dispute? No dispute, I said. I'm simply not authorizing the charge. I made the same call to Harlow Catering, to Garden and Stem, to Whitmore Photography. For calls. 11 minutes total. No raised voices. No long explanations. Just the same sentence 4 times. I'm not authorizing the charge. When I was done, I ordered room service breakfast, ate slowly, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Quiet. Not the quiet of suppressing something, but the quiet of a machine that has been running too loud for too long finally being switched off. I changed my flight. Moved it to Monday morning. An early departure that would have me back in Vancouver before noon. I had no reason to stay. On Monday morning before I left, I sat at the small hotel desk and drafted one email. Recipients: Helen, Martin, and Ivy. Subject line: for the record. I wrote it 3 times. The first draft was too long. The second had an edge in it that wasn't useful. The third was what I wanted. Precise, complete, with nothing in it I'd regret. Helen, Martin, and Ivy. I've formally removed my payment authorization from all 4 vendor contracts. The outstanding balance of $41,200 has been redirected to you as the event organizers. I flew 22 hours for this wedding. I signed every contract and paid every deposit. I was told at the door that I wasn't invited and introduced to the groom's family as a cousin. I don't believe any of you will have a straightforward explanation for that, but I want you to know that I understand it completely. I'm not interested in a relationship built on my usefulness. If any of you want to talk, honestly, not about invoices, I'll answer the phone. Serena. I read it twice. Sent it. Closed the laptop. Drove to the airport. I passed through Clover Falls on the way. Main Street at 6 a.m. The diner putting out chairs, a hardware store with a handwritten sign about summer hours, the Baptist church where I was confirmed at 14, the house I grew up in with the porch light still on. I didn't slow down. I turned onto the highway. I didn't look back. Helen called on Tuesday at 7 a.m. Vancouver time, which was 10 a.m. in Clover Falls, which meant she had been waiting for business hours before calling, which meant this was calculated rather than impulsive. Athena. I just got off the phone with the caterer. They're saying the invoice has been redirected. Serena, I said. A pause. What? My name is Serena. You've called me Athena twice in the last year. I've never mentioned it. I'm mentioning it now. Silence. Serena. The catering bill alone is $11,000. We are not in a position to. You weren't in a position to turn your daughter away from her sister's wedding either. You did it anyway. That is not what happened. You're dramatizing. You told Eleanor Thorne you only had 1 child. I was standing right there. A longer silence. The breathing changed. The strategy shifted. I have done everything for this family, she said. I raised 2 daughters on 1 income for 4 years when your father was out of work. I am not going to be treated like a criminal over a social misunderstanding. $41,000 isn't a social misunderstanding, Mom. It's what I was worth to you. The line went dead. She called back 40 minutes later. Different register. Harder. I want you to understand what you're doing to this family. To your sister's marriage. To your father's health. He's been stressed for weeks and this is. My father stood in that doorway and said nothing. He made his choice. So did you when you abandoned this family and moved to another province. I built a life. That's not abandonment. You left and you never looked back and now you want to punish us for. The contracts were in my name. They're still in my name. I removed my authorization. That's not punishment. That's a boundary. Don't use therapy language with me. Okay. Then here's plain language. You told a room full of people I don't exist. I responded by not paying for the room. The line went dead again. Ivy called that evening. She was crying, the full production kind, the kind that she had learned young would move mountains in our family dynamic. It used to move mountains in me too. Serena, please. We just got married. We're already dealing with so much. Declan's parents are being so cold. And we don't have $40,000 just sitting around. Can't you just? Ivy. My voice was gentle. I meant it to be. Did you know Mom was going to turn me away at the door? A pause. Then. She said it would be cleaner. Less complicated for Declan's family. Did you agree to it? Silence. You let it happen, I said. You let her erase me because it was cleaner. More silence. Then. I didn't think she'd actually. I thought you'd just come back another time and we'd. You thought I'd understand. Yes. And then I'd pay anyway. She didn't answer. That was its own answer. I love you, Ivy. But what you just described, that I'd understand being turned away from your wedding and pay for it anyway, that tells me everything about what I've been to this family. Not your sister. Your resource. I'm not that anymore. She was still crying when I ended the call. Gently. Firmly. Martin emailed 3 days later. Short. No subject line. Serena, I stood in that doorway and I didn't say a word. I know that. I'm not going to try to explain it because there's no explanation that's worth anything. Your mother and I will handle the vendors. I don't want you to carry that. I'm sorry I didn't walk you through the door. I'll carry that for a long time. Dad. I sat with that email for a long time. Read it at my desk on the train home, lying in bed that night. It wasn't enough to undo the years. But it was real. It was the first honest thing anyone in that family had said to me since the phone call in February when Helen asked me to sign the contracts. I wrote back a week later. 3 sentences. Dad, I read it. It meant something. I'm not ready to come home, but the door isn't locked. I didn't hear back. I didn't need to. What happened after was not dramatic. Real justice rarely is. The vendors redirected the invoices to Helen and Martin. My Aunt Doris, without my knowledge and without asking permission, called Eleanor Thorne to deliver a clean, factual account of what had happened. That Helen had 2 daughters, that the older one had signed every contract for the wedding, and that the older one had been turned away at the door and introduced as a distant cousin. Doris was a retired nurse. She had spent 40 years delivering difficult information without flinching. Eleanor Thorne received this information and called her son. Declan and Ivy's first real argument as a married couple, 4 days into their honeymoon, according to Doris's sources, which were impeccable, was about a sister the groom hadn't known existed. About a wedding his family had been lied to about. About a foundation built on a story that turned out to have a missing wall. Helen and Martin drained a savings account and arranged a payment plan with the vendors for the remaining balance. The Thornes helped with a portion, not out of generosity, Doris suspected, but because Eleanor was the kind of woman who could not tolerate her family's name being attached to an unpaid invoice. Helen stopped attending the church she'd gone to for 23 years, switched to one in another town. Doris said the story had made the rounds through the quilting circle and the church committee and at least 2 book clubs, the way stories do in small towns when they involve money and mothers and daughters at a wedding door. I wasn't there for any of it. I was in Vancouver, going to work, going to therapy, slowly learning to stop calling the capable version of myself the real one. My therapist, I started seeing her 6 weeks after the wedding, has a term for what I'd been doing. She calls it performing worthiness. The belief that if you do enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, carry enough, eventually the people who should love you freely will choose to. It is an exhausting performance. And the terrible thing about it is that it always feels like love. It feels like being a good daughter, a good sister, a good person. Feels like sacrifice. It isn't sacrifice. It's audition. And the audience in this case had already decided who got the lead. I talk to Doris every other Sunday. She keeps me informed, not to maintain the drama, but because she believes I have a right to know what's happening in the family I came from, even from a distance. Ivy and Declan are still married. Doris says they're working through it. Declan is a decent man, she thinks, who married into a story he didn't have all the pages for. Helen has not called me since our last phone call. The silence between us is different from the silence that came before. Before it was the silence of being managed. This is the silence of consequence. I can tell the difference now. Martin sent a text on my birthday. 2 months ago. Happy birthday, Serena. I think about what I should have done differently at that door. I hope you're well. Dad. I replied, thank you. I'm well. That's where we are. I want to leave you with the thing I couldn't have told you at the beginning of this story, because I didn't know it yet myself. The $41,000 was never really about money. It was about what I had taught my family to expect from me. That I would sign. That I would pay. That I would absorb. That I would show up and forgive and make the silence comfortable. That whatever they did, I would still be there the next time they needed something. The bill was just the moment the cost became legible. Removing my authorization wasn't revenge. I want you to hear that clearly. It wasn't cruelty, it wasn't a weapon. It wasn't designed to hurt anyone. It was the first time in my adult life that I let the consequence land where it belonged instead of carrying it myself. And in the space left by that, $6,000 of my own money gone, 22 hours of my life spent in an airport and a car in a parking lot. A dress I'll probably never wear again. In that space, something grew back. Me. Here is the question I genuinely cannot answer, and I want you to sit with it too. If you had been me, standing on that stone path, gift in hand, 22 hours of travel behind you, would you have walked through those doors and said your name out loud? Or would you have done what I did? Would you have left quietly and let the invoice do the talking? Tell me below. because I still don't know which answer is braver. Beach balloon. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. This story is inspired by real events shared online and adapted for storytelling purposes.